Good afternoon. Today we shall be discussing Coleridge's poem, This Lime Tree Bar My Prison. This Lime Tree Bar My Prison is a poem of Coleridge which expresses the complex joys of friendship and through friendship of the transcendental power of imagination. It celebrates nature too in the most effective way possible through evocation and not through description. Though it gives the impression of simplicity, it is in fact one of Coleridge's most carefully integrated poems, where the imagery, the emotions, and the ideas that rise out of them are fused through a carefully controlled syntax and a subtle modulation of tone. The poem never seems to have received its critical due, overshadowed as it were by poems composed during the same period of intense creative activity, namely Christabel, the Ancient Mariner, and Kubla Khan. In this poem, as in the Aeolian Harp, Frost at Midnight, and the later Dejection and Ode, we have a compelling and immediate access to Coleridge himself, already involved in the difficult battle to keep his muse alive and undeniably triumphant in these poems. This Lime Tree Bar My Prison takes the form of a verse epistle to Charles Lamb, Coleridge's close friend and schoolmate from Christ's Hospital, on the occasion of his visit to the poet at his Nether Stowey cottage. The epistle is ostensibly written while Lamb is on a walk with Coleridge's friends, Coleridge himself having been prevented from joining them because of an injury which he later said Sarah had spilled boiling milk on his foot. In later versions, Coleridge suppressed some of the autobiographical detail, gave the poem a more elaborate and assured plot, and a clearer development of thought. This is what Coleridge did to a far greater degree with Dejection and Ode. In order to make it an integrated poem, rather than merely a personal statement or outpouring, Coleridge removed much of the personal detail, the autobiography, and ultimately to make it a poetic whole, he fragmented it, broke it up into numbered sections, finding in this fragmentation and juxtaposition of parts the essential form for the complex emotion that he was to portray in this poem. The emotion itself was one of fragmentation. In other ways, this Lime Tree Bar My Prison resembles others of Coleridge's poems, in particular the Aeolian Harp and Frost at Midnight. It moves from a specific point in time and space outwards, varying and widening its perspective until, from a point of apparent stasis or captivity, from a state of apparent deprivation, the poem and the poet manage to liberate themselves, and when they return, find themselves enriched by their excursion. The poem opens with that colloquial, direct, and dramatic spontaneity and truth to voice and feeling that Lamb praised in Coleridge. Coleridge says, "Well, they are gone, and here must I remain, this lime tree bar my prison." It recalls the opening of Dejection and Ode. Well, if the bard was weatherwise who made the grand old ballad of Sir Patrick Spens. It is remarkable how Coleridge manages to sustain dramatic tension in an essentially reflective poem. In part, this is inherent in his use of direct address. We are reading a sort of letter, as it were, written to a specific person, and as in a novel by John Bailey, we are able to piece together the relationship from suggestions and hints in the poem. Why the poet loves his guest, where the guest comes from, and what his qualities of mind and spirit are. Thus, the drama decides partially in the manner in which the relationship is revealed. It is also due to the convincing manner in which Coleridge enters into Lamb's experience of the walk. The tension is further sustained by the shifting perspectives to and fro in space, from Lamb's view to Coleridge's in his bower and back again to Lamb's, and back and forth in time, the past of the relationship of the individuals, the urban past and the rural present, and something like a vision for the future. The contrast between Lamb's two experiences, pining patience in the great city pent, as opposed to his present release in a natural setting, is heightened by the opposite contrast of Coleridge's two experiences, rural freedom as opposed to his current injured, immobile state, pent up in his bower. These are a few of the central contrasts in the poem, rendered more vivid by their juxtaposition and the resonance they yield. Bower and wider landscape, city and countryside, past and present are all in play. The contrasts X finally fused in the flight of a bird, which seen and heard by Coleridge and Lamb in different places and at slightly different times, unites with its creaking flight, its single vision, the two men in a shared symbolic experience. The disparate elements in the poem are essentially and symbolically fused by the word. Coleridge is Protean, entering into the experience of his friend and returning to his own experience in the poem. The negative capability, to use Keats's term, in his identification with Lamb is a principal element in the intense generosity and optimism of the poem, because he is not becoming passive but actively creating reciprocity. He uses Lamb even as he joys with him. Lamb as a vehicle for his escape from the bower bondage, just as he is a vehicle for Lamb's escape from the city bondage. The poem celebrates relationship, and Coleridge has captured a sense of mutuality that such poems seldom achieve. Perhaps only Pope's celebrated Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, which is a different poem entirely, celebrates friendship so intensely in English literature, and Pope's poem, subjective as it is, hasn't the sympathetic penetration of Coleridge's. As well as the thematic matrix of the poem, we have recurrent and modulated images, images of natural growth, sound and movement, and images of constraint. The natural harmony of things alive, whether large and spacious, or particular and small, are constantly confronted with the sense of deprivation, which they overcome by power that imagination, heightened by friendship, finds in them. There is the image, thus, of natural bridges, the ash tree, or the bird, for example. The poem is an act of validation. It validates a vision which Coleridge shares, perhaps not naturally, but in the joy of the moment, intensely and sincerely with Lamb. No sound is dissonant, which tells of life, Coleridge famously says. On perhaps the most direct level, the poem is dramatic because of the way the syntax is developed. Let us take, for instance, these lines where Coleridge says, "They, meanwhile, friends whom I never more may meet again, on springy heath along the hilltop edge, wander in gladness and wind down perchance to that still roaring dell of which I told. The rearing dell o'er wooded narrow deep, and only speckled by the midday sun, where its slime trunk, the ash from rock to rock, flings archings like a bridge, that branchless ash, unsunned and damp, whose few poor yellow leaves ne'er tremble in the gale, yet tremble still, fanned by the waterfall. And there, my friends, behold the dark green file of long, lank weeds, that all at once a most fantastic sight, still nod and trip beneath the dripping edge of the blue clay stone. As Coleridge imagines his friends descending the hill, he uses a single sentence which wanders down with them, pausing where they pause, seeing what they see, and comes to rest at a full stop only when their eyes rest on the grasses and the clay at the bottom of the hill. Then the rhythm set rests on the three stresses of blue clay stone. The sentence mimes the descent of the walkers in its rather tentative syntax. We do not only glance at that still roaring dell of which I told, with the mystery of still roaring having an assuredly Miltonic touch. We glance and then look again. The roaring dell were wooded, narrow deep. When we see the ash, similarly we hesitate. We move from the ash in its general setting to that branchless ash, a very particular tree. It partakes of the protective stillness of the dell. Its few palsied leaves ne'er tremble in the gale. But again we have the sense of the natural power of the place. The waterfall trembles, leaves that the wind does not touch. The image, like the one before, is repeated and expanded after the first quick perception of it. In the expansion of the image, it comes into focus and its relationship to the previous image is clarified. The sentence ends on the heavy stressed blue clay stone in the dark, almost sunless dell. Then the walkers emerge suddenly beneath the wide, wide heaven, all the more bright for the previous darkness. This movement too embodies the theme of the poem, the movement out of constraint and darkness into light and air. The descent involves an experience not merely described but syntactically mined. Three prominent images of the natural dell are evoked. Nevertheless, these images are still points. Around them cluster the adjectives, adverbs, and verbs which fill out the scene with sense, visual detail, sound, and atmosphere. Each sentence in the poem is as carefully structured as this. Each mimes a natural or an intellectual perception. The conclusions Coleridge draws from the imagery and plot evolve with the same ease as the imagery itself. This apparent inevitability is the height of Coleridge's art. To write a poem of 76 lines in blank verse, which moves from the ironic despondence of the opening and proceeds by deft poetic steps quite naturally to the triumphant assertion that nature ne'er deserts the wise and pure, that the meanest place and the meanest object are imbued with nature and natural qualities that our senses perceive, and that once perceived enrich the heart, is a unique achievement. There is an almost Wordsworthian quality about this poem, a sense of the physical world. The poem is in love with natural reality, perception, the sensuous power of the imagination. It is ultimately Coleridge's great love poem, as it were, expressing the fulfillment of a rich relationship in imaginative sympathy.